Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk. Today's topic is Commerce Mass Deployment with SCM. My name is David, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. This session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. When you join this event, your name, email address, and/or phone number may be viewable by other session participants in the attendee list. By joining, you're agreeing to this experience. The recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within the coming weeks. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions during and at the end of the presentation. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Presenting for us today, we have Minu Lal, Harish Jayaprakash, and Jared Shannon. Minu, over to you.
Thank you, David. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you guys are joining us from. We are excited to present today's topic, Commerce Mass Deployment with SCCM. So to keep things a little interesting, we do have a riddle for the day. The riddle is, the more you code, the more of me there is. I may be gone for now, but you can't get rid of me forever. What am I? Please put your answer in chat and we'll reveal the answer at the end of the Tech Talk. So as this Tech Talk is a part of the series, we'll kick off today's Tech Talk about Commerce Mass Deployment with SCCM. Please do look out for our future Tech Talks, first one will be for Commerce Mass Deployment with Intunes. The next one will be for Commerce Mass Deployment Dependency with SCCM and Intunes. Let's check our agenda for today. We'll start by explaining about what is Store Commerce app and how you can mass deploy it to our different clients. Then we'll switch gear and talk about terminology. We'll give you a lot of demos. We'll make sure that we end up with you telling about how to do it, a new Store Commerce app installation. We'll also showcase how to do a hardware station installation. We'll talk about how you can upgrade from one version to another version. We'll leave you with some tips and tricks, and at the end, we'll provide you some resources and we'll leave some time for Q&A. I'm going to hand over to Gerard to talk about overview.
Thank you, Minu, very much. Let's go ahead and jump into the next slide. So hitting, of course, the big what, where, when, why, who, how, all the fun, joyous questions. Mass deployment is the biggest piece of how to be able to deploy at scale across entire organizations. As such, the big keys we want to focus in on is the concepts of reducing these costs, reducing maintenance, reducing the time to go live on a new build or a purposeful deployment. When we get to the why of it, the minimization of costs that occur is critical. There's a complexity to any type of installation at scale, and getting that across System Center gives you a variety of monitoring and capabilities through both service updates, deployments, etc., the method in which you perform rollouts, all of which give you reasons and value in terms of feedback through System Center. So that's the real focus of it. This, of course, occurs in the win every time you perform a deployment. Then from then on, gives you greater feedback, as I had mentioned, in terms of what those rollouts mean, where various terminals stand. And it's not exclusive to System Center. Minu hinted at it right before this, that we'll in the future talk about Intune as well. And there's also a variety of third-party tools that can function in a very similar manner. We're focused in on System Center today, mostly because it has kind of the all-up viewpoint. And then as we get into things like Intune and such, we can hit on some of the more specific topics. If we'll go next, Minu. So just to kind of discuss architecture a little bit at a very high level, there's two quote unquote formal versions of Store Commerce. There's the standard similar to Modern Point of Sale in-app version. This is the one that will support offline, 100% managed locally, has that local hardware station. Additionally, through iOS and Android, we have more of a hybrid version, and this functions much more towards Cloud POS, where it's simply a shell in regards to the quote unquote app, and then Cloud Point of Sale forms are what are getting pulled in instead of them being local to Modern Point of Sale. With Store Commerce in the hybrid mode, it still has that local hardware station. We've actually built that into Android as well now, and iOS is coming soon. And of course, Cloud Point of Sale being managed centrally in their commerce scale unit means that you have fewer points to where you're performing updates as opposed to just the app shell, which doesn't have as critical of an update mechanism. We'll hit the next one, Minu. So to give just a basic between Store Commerce and MPOS, there is very little difference in regards to what is visible. I want to make it very clear that from a functionality perspective, they are exactly the same at this point. We are functionally equivalent. Even the localizations, we've pushed out a lot of them into the .29 build, so localizations are heavily available now as well. The basics across Modern Point of Sale versus Store Commerce focused on the Windows version. The number one is the switch from the UWP app and the rendering framework therein to the Chromium engine. This is what Edge did. We're following right along. This gives huge performance boosts. It also has allowed us to uptake a variety of framework improvements that have drastically reduced any type of time and value in terms of performance. The biggest piece from there is extensions. So in Modern Point of Sale, everything got bundled together and you end up getting an independent package that is signed and generated by the customer. In Store Commerce, we have split that apart. So you're getting an installer from Microsoft always for the base Store Commerce package, and then you're getting separate installer for extensions, customizations, etc. And between those two, that's going to hopefully, in the long run, give a lot more capabilities in terms of backwards compatibility, the ability to deploy without as much impact and without as much development time. Hopefully, in the long term, this ends up meaning faster deployments. So we'll hit next, Minu. And there's a series of benefits that come out of this. I had already mentioned performance. Just to give it that actual value, it does get sometimes as fast as twice as fast as Modern Point of Sale. There are various scenarios in that specific regard. A variety of improvements have occurred across login, add to cart, some of the more critical scenarios. We do have those extreme critical paths around transactions, log on, the ability to seamless switch to offline. And that goes then to our update experience as well, because we're moving to that kind of independent deployment model where it's Microsoft versus extensions as separate installers. This again gives that ease of focus for us as the Dynamics development team to be able to really dive in and push hard on mass deployment, making it no longer a GUI based, no longer graphically user interface, and instead be focused around command line, focused around mass deployment in a remote scenario. And then lastly, I had mentioned some of those uptakes that we were able to do. So WebView 2 was a big one. Being able to take advantage of concepts like NuGet and GitHub, huge value in that regard as well from a dev experience. So all up, it's been quite beneficial in that scenario. Minu, next slide, please. So just to kind of hit on the overall migration plan. Obviously, we say this all the time. I'll reiterate now, of course. We want all data synchronized before you perform an installation before you perform an update. So nothing should be in that offline database anymore. It all should be synchronized HQ, all P jobs run, everything cleared, post all statements, just get all the data you can out. And that finally gets us to the real steps of modifying the device at headquarters. You can on the device switch from modern point of sale to store commerce now. This can be discussed. It's not as critical as I'm making it, but we would prefer it to be this way. And I can dive into details more in questions on that one. But generally speaking, you want to make that switch. Then we get to the big steps, the uninstallation of modern point of sale, download the Store Commerce app, install the Store Commerce app, activate the app, because device activation is still a function in Store Commerce. Now I've got these X's here for a reason. We are actively right now working on a feature that we're trying to get out the door as quick as possible that will perform the uninstall of modern point of sale along with the installation of Store Commerce. And in so doing, it will quote unquote steal the device token from modern point of sale to use in Store Commerce so that you do not need to perform device activation. So our goal is to cut away these steps so that all you have to do is take the Store Commerce app and perform the installations, and it will take care of the rest itself. That's the goal, at least. Minu, one more, please. So from here, talking about terminology, talking about prerequisites, I'm going to hand it back to Minu, and I'll jump into the Q&A. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Chirag. So let's talk about different terminology and pre-requesty before we dig in for any of those demos. The first thing is terminology, right? As we've been talking about SCCM, what exactly it is, right? So the System Center, which is the System Center, we call it short form. The System Center is an administrative tool that enables the organization to manage and safeguard devices and software within their environments. SCCM takes care of the hardware inventory and distributing software and patches. That's what we'll be utilizing today, which brings us to our sites. So when you install your configuration manager for the first time, the first configuration manager site that you install determines the scope of the hierarchy. The first configuration manager site is the foundation from which you'll manage the devices and the user in your enterprise. The first site must be either a central administration site or a standalone primary site. You can decide how you want to do it. The next is distribution point, next the key point. So SCCM distribution point is a configuration manager server role where packages are stored for later distribution. Whenever a client needs to download a new application or a package, it needs to contact the distribution point on that site. So it is important to note that how a client locates its distribution point. This is done by creating boundaries, which bring us to our next concept of boundaries. So boundaries are used to make the client select the closest server from where the contents to be transferred. Next one is collections. So the collections help you organize the resources in a manageable unit. You can create collection to match your client management needs and to perform operation on multiple resources at the same time. So in our demo today, we'll be using a device collection. That way we don't have to push our application differently on every single client machine. We'll be using a device collection to push that from our server to a client. The next is application and packages. Application is comparatively a new feature which is being added in SCCM. So it had new features like detection method, which could be used to check if app is already present or not. And application allows you to add dependency also if there's any trigger that you want to do any trigger on another application. So a recommendation for you to use application for MSI or EXE packages. That's what we'll be using today also in our demo. And packages require little less details, but you cannot mention the detection method and all those upgraded features which we added for the application. Let's talk about some of the pre-requesting that needs to be done before you start doing your SCCM moving from server to a client. So the first one is we do mention that all machine needs to be on domain with asterisk because there are other ways around it, but that's the assumption we are going with, that all machine needs to be in domain. Our assumption is that SCCM setup is being done already and configured, we're going to be providing you some resources at the end in the blog article to help you guys with that. Our assumption is you have already installed the IAS with your site from SCCM on it too. Our assumption is you already have a .NET version 4.81, and the reason we put asterisk depending upon which SCCM version you're using, you're gonna decide which .NET version it needs. The other one is Dynamics 365 system requirements. Again, whatever, depending upon which software you're installing, so that depends on that, which system requirements need to do. And same for the hardware requirement. We're going to be showcasing your hardware installation. But again, whatever the hardware you're installing, let's say if you're doing a printer, you want to make sure your MPOS driver is already there, right, before you go ahead and do it. So those kind of hardware requirements it covers. We do mention about HQ configuration completed. The reason behind it, you want to make sure you already have your register configured, you already have your devices configured. So all kind of, you have validated your devices and make registered and make sure they are ready to be used for the Store Commerce app. So those are the pre-requesting, which that being said, these are the different commands which we're going to be using our demo. Again, these are mentioned on our doc side. The reason we have mentioned it here in case you want to use anything, you want to replicate our demo and you want to see where the commands are, you can simply copy paste from here. This one, the first two are for install and uninstall of Store Commerce app. The last one is for the hardware installation. We did put skip OPAS check because in that demo, we are not checking it. But again, you can put different variables depending upon how and what you want to install and what not, right? The one thing to be noticed is that for hardware command, we do have double dashes instead of single. So just highlighting that is one of the reasons we have mentioned that commands. Which that being said, let's just dig into our demo. The first demo will concentrate on how to do a fresh installation of Store Commerce app. The scenario is the customer wants to adopt a Store Commerce app. He wants to push the Store Commerce app from the server to all the client machines. So that's the scenario we're going to be focusing on our first demo. All right, so let's dig in. The first step, we would suggest that you create a shared folder. And in our case, we have created a shared folder in C drive and apps. We have separated every single folder depending upon what we are doing. Like for Store Commerce app, we have 2 different versions and we have added an exe file there to make it easy. That way you know which one you're uploading and whatnot. Now we'll go to our SCCM or a configuration manager. We'll go to software library and we'll go application. As you said, that we're going to be using an application. So we'll click on create application. If you notice that we don't have any type here, that's why we're going to be choosing manually specify the application information. We'll go ahead and put our name as Store Commerce app. We would like to put 10.028 that we can easily tell which one is which version, just to keep it easy to recognize. We'll put our publisher as Microsoft. We'll give a software version as 10.028. We'll go next. The next step, we're not going to be changing anything here. The language looked correct. This is the important step. Here we'll be defining the deployment type. We'll click on script installer as we are using script and do a manually install. We'll put the name same as there. We'll click our content. Remember, we talk about using a shared location. So we'll go to a shared location. We'll choose our Store Commerce app correct version. We are doing 10.028. We'll select the folder here. In the next one, we'll choose our exe file. Once you choose the exe file, we're going to be putting a command next to it called install. That's how the script will install on the client machine. So we'll copy paste the exact same thing on uninstall. Make sure you put uninstall. That way it takes the command correctly. So next step is a detection method, which is very important. The reason behind it, we want to make sure if client doesn't already have that Store Commerce app deployed or client there. If it's not there, it's going to go install. If it's already there, it's not going to do it. So that's what detection step does. Another thing is, I mean, depending upon, again, if you're upgrading, you'll put a different one. So the next step is we are installing it for the user. So we'll do next here. As of now, we don't have any requirements for our demo, but you can put requirements as needed. And same applies for the dependency. If there are any dependency, you want to make sure that these is done before you do a Store Commerce app, you can add it right there. And we'll click next. Once you click it, it's going to give you, say that it's completed and successfully done. You're going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and check our script to 100% sure it's correct. So we'll go to our content and look at it. One thing we'll change here is the deployment option because we want to download the content before we run locally. That way we have a file itself on the client, if whatever reason, if we need to do whatever, if any errors, we want to make sure file is still there. We'll make sure that we have a correct command. We'll make sure about the detection method. It exists. So we'll click apply and come back and we'll do next. No changes here. It's just talking about the confirmation. Now our application has been completed successfully. So as you notice that now our application is there with the name Store Commerce App 10028. The first step is distributing the content from, that's where our distribution pointed. That from there, it's going to go to a different client's machine. So we already have our distribution point. And we'll select that one and click next. That would just distribute the content to a distribution point. The next step is to deploy from distribution point to a client machine. So we'll click on deploy. We'll choose our collection. As mentioned, we'll be using a device collection. We have created a device collection called POS device collection. We'll go ahead and choose that here. We'll click OK here, and then we'll click next. It did choose our distribution point already. So we'll click next here. In our case, we want to make it required instead of just available to keep it forcefully. And you can schedule your deployment. For us, we're going to keep it as soon as possible. Again, it could be scheduled anytime you want. If you have a store, you want to make sure it's not done in the daytime. It should be done in the nighttime and whatnot. So you can choose those things too. User experience, we want to show it in the software center and show all the notifications. You can set up even the alerts also to have a flexibility that for now, we're not going to set up any alerts. Now it's just a summary. We'll click next and close it. So that deployed from server to a client machine. Now we'll go to our client machine. So that's our client machine. If we open, we'll go ahead and open the software center to see whether app is already there. Usually it takes time. It's going to happen automatically. But again, depending upon what's your maintenance window and whatnot, to keep it quicker for the demo purpose, we'll go ahead and manually push it. So we can go to Configuration Manager and click on Actions. We'll be running two files. One of them is machine policy. The another one is a user policy. What it does, it quickly pushes that app into your client machine. So right now, if you see, it's installing. As you see the status, and then it's just making sure all the pre-request is there. As soon as it checks the pre-request, it's going to download it and install it on your client machine. So if you notice, there is a shortcut right there in the desktop itself called Store Commerce App. And even on the software center, it says install. So we'll double click Store Commerce App and just check it, whether it's done or not, just whatnot, just to make sure. As you can see, the Store Commerce App is already there. You still have to manually register and activate the app, as with the same experience with MPOS, but we just showed up this one. So I'm going to hand over to Harish for the rest of the two demos and the tips and tricks.
Thanks, Minu. With that, we'll just look into the next two demos, primarily starting off with the hardware station installation, and then we'll look into the update scenario for the Store Commerce app. So when we get into the hardware station installation, so we have already imported the file or created the application using the similar step what Minu showcased. So we just quickly get into how we are going to go ahead and deploy. So for this demo purpose, we kind of brought in the file, and then primarily we went ahead and distributed it. So the next step is primarily for us to go ahead and deploy. Before deploying, we just want to quickly showcase what's there in the deployment types. So if you go to the programs and the deployment type properties, you'll see the command that we are going to use for the installation. So that's something that we already shared in the slide earlier. And then we are going to look into the detection method again. We just configured a detection method just like what we did with the fresh installation. We're just looking out for that file. And primarily, we are done with the deployment types. So the next ideal step for us is to go ahead and deploy it. So we're just going to go ahead and click on deploy, where we are going to give the collection like what we did earlier. So we're going to select the same POS device collection that we use. So select the device collection, and we're just going to go ahead and select the POS device collection, click on OK. And that would going to take us to the next step where we are going to give the content. There's no change as we already configured the distribution point. It's already been picked up here. No changes to this screen. So you're going to go ahead and click on next. I'm going to make this purpose required. So we don't want to make any changes. We want to push it. So click on next there. Scheduling, as Minu mentioned, we just want to do as soon as possible. So no changes there, and no changes to the user experience and alerts as well. Summary, it's going to summarize and show what configuration we have set. So we are good and clicking on next. So ideally that completed my deployment. So now I'm switching over to the client machine to quickly go ahead and showcase what's there. So as you see, the 10.0.28 is already installed. I don't see a hardware station file being pushed to the software center in my client machine. So like what we did, we're just going to open up the configuration manager properties and then going to run two policies, the machine policy and then the user policy, primarily to enforce the system to go ahead and pick up the file. In ideal world situation, this is going to be picked up or pushed based on the maintenance schedule that you have picked up. In our case, we don't want to wait for that time, so we just pushed it as soon as possible. So if you see here, it's already installing. The file has been pushed and it started installing now. Primarily, it's going to do the similar step of looking for the prerequisites, whatever is available or whatever is in place. It's just going to run the prerequisites and then primarily wait for the installation to complete. What we are going to do is while this is running, we're just going to, after this installation, we're just quickly going to open up and see if the installation is complete. We'll just go ahead and open up the add or remove programs just to verify the hardware station is installed. We have not done additional configuration here. We just primarily installed it. The additional steps of configuring the hardware station still needs to be done manually. That's something that you have to watch out for when you're doing this installation. So as I said, we're just going to go to add and remove programs just to verify if the installation is complete. If you see here, the program is already installed. We are not going to double click and went to the configuration. Now, what we have seen is hardware station installation. With that, we'll quickly get into the next demo where we wanted to talk about the update scenario, updating the existing StoreCommerce app. As you have seen in the previous demo, we have installed StoreCommerce 10.2.28. Now, before getting into the demo, we just wanted to showcase what is the current version of StoreCommerce app installed in the client machine. So you can see it's going to be 10.0.28. So the build version, if you go ahead and click on that, you're going to see 9.38.222.30.4. So now that we have verified that, we're just going to go to our server machine, and then we are going to quick start the creating the application. You might see some of the steps are repetitive over here as well. We just want to showcase it one more time in terms of how you're going to go ahead and create the application. What are the other steps that you need to take care when you're creating an application, and where you need to focus a bit more when you're doing the mass deployment. So over here, we're just going to go to the software library again, and then you're just going to go ahead and click on create application like what we did in the earlier scenario. So we're just going to click on create application, and primarily we are going to go ahead and do it manually like what we did earlier. We're just going to install the exe file. So selecting the manual and clicking on next. And the next step, we are going to give the general information. So like Meenu mentioned earlier, we're just going to give StoreCommerce app and differentiate with the version that we are going to update. We are updating to 10.29. And the same commands is something that we are going to add to the administrator comments. In the software version, we're just going to give 10.0.29 there. And publisher, we're just going to put it as Microsoft for this demo. And so there is no other change to the screen. We just modified this for better identification in the software center, and just going to go on, click on next. So in the software center, it's going to remain the same. There's no change to the language. So click on next again. There's no change there. And then the deployment type is key again. Like what we configured earlier, we're going to do the same. So going and adding a deployment type and selecting a script installer rather than MSI file here. And then primarily clicking on next, you see that manual specify the deployment type information is auto-selected. So we're just going on clicking on next. I'm going to use the same name that we have used while creating the package. So for the application, so we're just providing it here, clicking on next. In the content, I'm going to select the location from where the file has to be done. So similar to what we have seen in the earlier demo. So we are going to go to the network share. We are going to go to the apps and then the StoreCommerce app, and then go into 10.0.29 primarily, and then that's the folder where I'm going to select the content. And in the next step, primarily, if you see that it's going to take me to within 10.0.29 and selecting the installer there. So I'm just going to click on open, and once the installation program or the exe file is there, I'm just going to add the command install, which is going to perform a silent installation for us. Like we did earlier, copy paste and then replace install to uninstall. That's the uninstall command that we are going to use in case if you have. So we're just going to go next, and then we're going to add a class here, like what we did earlier, the detection class. We're going to identify the file. So I'm going to go ahead and click on browse and navigate to the place where the Store Commerce app gets installed. So when I go to browse, we're going to go to C drive, and in the program files, you would see Microsoft Dynamics 365. That's where I'm going to go. I'll go ahead and double click on Dynamics 365 there, 10.0, Store Commerce. And then primarily, I'm going to get into the setup files. Within the setup files, you could see the exe file which is available. So that's where the detection method we are using for this demo. You can use it based on the need that you have. For this demo, we're just using this, and then just changing it to see like, hey, in this file, look in this folder, look for the file, and with the date modified. I'm just for the demo purpose, we gave after 1st September 10, 2022, and then giving a time as 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. Sorry. So we're just going to use that. That's what we are giving it here. And if you see that we're just changing the operator type rather than equal to, we're just checking like greater than or equal to, so in order to check if there is any other file on that time. So we're just giving it, and then we'll just click on OK. Just wanted to verify if everything is fine there. So we'll just go ahead and edit the class again. If you see there, I wanted to do it by 12 a.m. I see it's configured as 12 p.m. So I'm just changing that there, and then basically clicking on OK. So this sets my detection method good. So we are going next. And there's going to be no change to my user experience requirements or the dependencies. As Meenu mentioned earlier, we're still going to do an install for user. Though there's no changes, and then summary, click on next. So the deployment type is added to the application now. Now, again, what we are going to do is we're going to go ahead and double click and check if my deployment types are good. So I'm just going to edit it. And if you go to the content, everything is fine. I'm just going to change the deployment option again to download the content from distribution point and run locally. And then I'm going to go to programs to check, verify my installation program is right. It's good. And the detection method, I'm just going to verify it once again. Everything is set for me. So there's no changes to it, additional changes to it. So I'm just going to click on OK. And then we're going to go next step. So it's summary. I'm just going to click on next. So it's primarily going to install or import the application for me. So like what we see earlier, once you create an application, the next ideal step for you is to go ahead and create or distribute the content. Before that, I just want to double click again and check if my deployment type properties are in place. So content, what we have set is there, and similarly the programs, I have the right program methods, and then the detection type, everything is good. Now we are going to go ahead and distribute this content to my client machine. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on distribute content. Going to click on next, no changes in this place. If you see here, the distribution point is already picked up from our application and we created it. And over here, I'm just going to click on distribution point, and then I'm going to select what we have already configured. Click on OK. The distribution point is here, and then click on next. It's just going to summary. It shows like, hey, the content is distributed now. We are good to go ahead and do a deployment. Now the next step, I'm going to right click on this, go ahead and click on deploy. So it's going to follow the same steps. So I'm just going to browse the collection. We're going to use the POS device collection that we had. So we're just selecting that, click on OK, and primarily click on next. So just to verify the content. So you see the distribution point is automatically picked up. So we are good there. Click on next. And deployment settings, again, I'm going to make it as required just for the demo purpose. So click on next there. Scheduling, there is no change. As Meenu mentioned, you can schedule it based on the necessity, but for this demo purpose, we want to do it as soon as possible. So no changes to the scheduling, user experience, and the alerts. Clicking on next. And summary is going good, and I'm just completed the deployment. So once I've done with the deployment, we are switching over to the client machine to primarily go ahead and check the current version. So ideally, in a typical use case scenario, you're going to get the file automated based on the maintenance window that you've selected. But in this case for demo, we're just going to enforce, and so that it can pick up a file, we are going to follow the same procedure, running those two policies on the configuration manager properties. Once that is executed, you can primarily see at the back end, you're going to get 29 file being uploaded. So you see that software changes are required. File is there at the back end. It started the downloading, and it's going to install automatically. You would see the exe running in, and then you're going to primarily see what other prerequisite steps that's going to do with taking a backup, and other prerequisites are going to be followed over here for the installation procedure. So once the installation is complete, we're going to end this demo with verifying the version after the installation. So let the installation complete. So we're just going to go ahead and open up the StoreCommerce app once again, just to verify which version is installed. If you have noticed, in terms of update, we don't have to go ahead and activate it. So it's going to be the same. So we're just opening it up. There's no activation needed in this case. So we see that it's 9.39.22266 there. So we are good with that. And then primarily, we have done the update scenario from 9.38 to 9.39. That ends our demo. We'll quickly get on to the next steps where we're going to talk about some of the tips and tricks that we have found while setting up this environment for the showcasing the demo. Some of the key tips and tricks, like I wanted to start off with the network share file. So like what Minu mentioned of the showcase, primarily the network share file is key for you in terms of maintaining the nomenclature, and that will be very easy for you to maintain it in the later stage as well. So define what is the folder structure that you're going to have the appropriate files in the folder structure, and ensure that that network share file is being accessible from the client machine in order to download and install there. The second one is the log files folder, which is going to be key. So when we are trying to set up the SCCM, we were getting some of the errors and issues. So we were struggling to get where to find it. But fortunately, we are able to identify, hey, there is a folder within C drive, program files, Microsoft Configuration Manager.logs. That's where you're going. All the logs for your SCCM is stored. You can install cmtrace.exe, which will help you to go ahead and look into the SCCM logs at the server side. So that was very useful for us. So we wanted to highlight that here. Another important thing is, while we are doing the mass deployment, the first step that we did is like manually try to install the file from the software center. That kind of helped us to understand what are the prerequisites that would be needed when you're primarily going ahead and installing automatically or the silent installation. So that's one of the pieces we tried. That helped us to identify why it was failing in case of the hardware station. There are some of the prerequisites that we have missed. That's where we found out, and then we went ahead and edited the registry in our client machine in order to accommodate those. And the user or system deployment context is something very important. If you have seen our demos, we primarily used install for user. We did not use for system context. The ultimate goal for us to go ahead and use the system context. But for now, for MPOS and hardware station, we went ahead and used the user context there. And the other important thing that we would like to call out is using the help command in the PowerShell to find out the additional parameters that you would need. In our scenario, we use install and uninstall. On the hardware station, we had an additional parameters like skipping the MPOS check. So if you want to know, hey, what are the additional parameters that I can utilize for silent installation, you can run this command with the help command, be it like StoreCommerce app exe or the hardware station installer exe. Use that along with the help command. You can identify what are the steps, what are the additional parameters that you can use. All these are documented in our docs.microsoft.com as well. We have added that in URL in our reference section later. The last one that we wanted to talk about is the detection method, which is again important, which will ideally help you to go ahead and identify if you have the file already installed, and then based on that, you're going to perform the necessary action. If it is like update scenario, I want to see if there is a particular file which is already there, I'm going to go ahead and install on top of that. So with that, we'll just quickly move on to the next one, where we're going to talk about the next steps. So we from Microsoft plan to come up with a couple of tech talks, like Minu mentioned on the top. We're going to talk about doing a mass deployment using Intune, and then we're going to talk about the dependency scenario for Intune and SCCM both. So that's the upcoming tech talks that we have. And we have planned to come up with a rapid start guide for customers who plan, or customers or partners who plan to migrate from MPOS to StoreCommerce app as well. That's something that we are planning to come up with. You need to watch out for that space. The next one is we do have a compatibility report. If a customer or partner wants to identify, hey, what are the classes or what are the migration touch points that you need to have, you need to create a support ticket for MPOS to StoreCommerce compatibility report. And the next one is we plan to have a partner bootcamp specifically to help you out for moving from MPOS to the StoreCommerce app. So we plan to deliver a 4-day partner bootcamp. So there's a registration URL that we have shared. We recommend our partners to go ahead and register and make use of it. Post the partner bootcamp, we do have office hours, which is planned to answer your questions and give us update to the partners and the customers there. With that, we just quickly wanted to share some of the reference URLs that we use. So most of the docs URLs we have added here. And then the Tech Talk, previous Tech Talks that we have, which gives you a bit more overview about the new Store Commerce app. And then we have added the blog, which was very useful for us to go ahead and refer while we are setting up the SCCM, be it like setting up the SCCM server or the client configurations and whatnot. So we have added it for your reference here. And with that, we'll quickly go ahead and see the answer for the brain teaser or the riddle of the day. I've seen most of you answered it right. So it's bug, which the more you code, you're going to have it more there. So our ask is to ensure that we provide the bug-free environment to our partners and customers. With that, I'm just going to open up a flow for Q&A. I don't know, Minu or Gerard, if we have to call out any specific questions that you wanted to answer. I see like most of this you already answered there.
I've worked very hard, but I do have a question that I wasn't 100% on, so I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this. Does System Center have a duplicate or copy function for the applications and/or deployments?
Interesting question.
Very interesting. Go ahead, Harish.
Very interesting question. We have not tried the duplicate scenario because primarily in our case, we wanted to create new packages all the time or the new application all the time. We have not explored that option. Probably that's something that we can add and then we can share it to the world later if we have those options there. You want to add anything there?
No, I think you covered it well. We haven't tried it, but just because we had we were doing different things, but yeah, we can work on it and get back to you guys on that.
Yeah, I would like to understand what scenario you want to duplicate the application or the package, right? Like, I know the configurations might get tricky at times, but duplicating it, it's going to end up in the same configuration for you so that you can go ahead and edit. But yeah, but that's something that we have not tried. Probably we can have a look at that later.
I think there are more questions also, Gerard. There's one more, I guess. Oh, you already published, great.
Yep, sorry, I'm trying to hit them as we go.
So
there was a question of where we can consume the links that were mentioned. And if I recall correctly, David has mentioned this will be published. You will get access to all this, so the links will be made available. And then checking, they're coming in quick, so I'm trying to hit them as we go here. I think that's it on that one. I'm not gonna call out anybody who's actively trying to say things. There was a question outside of the concept in regards to prerequisites and how that handles. I did publish it as well, but I want to make sure this gets verbally stated. System Center does have a central point of management, a central point of logging, a central point for a lot of things. And it can handle a lot of concepts in regards to how failures occur, what the failure scenarios are, etc. Store Commerce additionally has its own logging, which can be verbose as well if desired. So there's a variety of possibilities in that regard. System Center has the capabilities to pull files as necessary to a centralized location as well. You can easily check for failures and then read said logs. You can validate scenarios as to why it was failing. Obviously, in a perfect world, the test will function and then it works across all of your clients because they're exactly the same as test. But of course, we know in the real world that's not always the case. So yeah, I would absolutely be willing to talk more about that if folks have questions, but generically speaking, you'll see the failure in System Center first, and then you'll be able to check the logs.
There's one new one which just came. I'm going to read it loud. Is there a preferred process for installing sealed install and the customization package followed by activation?
So the sealed installer you've seen, we showcased that a couple of different times, including the update scenario. The customization package would be exactly the same based upon any needs you have for said customization package. Typically, from what we see so far, is customers just have a flat package and it's just a matter of pushing files for the most part. So shouldn't be an issue in any sense in that regard, but that's not to say there aren't any specifics that are being added in by the customer, so or partner for that matter. So please take that as a grain of salt based upon what the needs are in that scenario. Then it's mentioned followed by activation. I don't want to say it outright. We are absolutely aware that device activation is difficult at the best of times. We are actively wanting to improve that to an extreme. And I'll leave it as that little gem right there.
Okay, good answer. There's another one called earlier in the presentation. It was said that Commerce app does not need a separate hardware station install. And then after you demoed installing the hardware station, I'm confused about this. Do we need to install a separate hardware station or no?
Short answer is no. Both for Windows and Android at the moment, we have Hardware Station built into the application. iOS is pretty soon to follow. We're just finishing some things up for that. Hardware being a little different in terms of how it's handled for iOS. That said, we specifically wanted to showcase Hardware Station as it's sometimes a customer-driven need. There are business scenarios where the terminals are incredibly mobile and they don't want to have all the hardware built into the terminals. So instead, they have centralized hardware stations, regardless of the in-process hardware station or not. So there's a variety of possibilities there, and that's what we're trying to hit on. Clear my throat as well. I assume they're just saying I need this document, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
If there are any other questions, please feel free. We do have still a good amount of time left to be able to answer questions. And then we also will have our afternoon session, I believe.
We'll just give a couple more minutes, Jared, to see if there
Absolutely.
are any questions. If not, probably we'll hand it over back to David. All right. I don't see any new questions coming up, Jared. So just wanted to thank everyone for joining, spending time here, based on your busy schedule. Oh, I do have one question. So does the same extension package used for MPOS, can it be transferred to the Store Commerce app without a code update? Do you want to take that one?
Absolutely. There is code updates that occur. And typically, I don't want to say this holistically because it's not the case. Typically, there's minimal code change that needs to be done. And we do have a variety of documents around how to perform this, a variety of documents around what that alteration is necessary for, et cetera, et cetera. So please make sure to check documentation thoroughly. in regards to the actual installation itself, as I had mentioned previously, and I believe it's in a published question also, it should be as simple as the installer, if not even more simple, in the sense that it's a basic executable pushing files, so it shouldn't require much of anything.
All right. Thanks, Jared. And thanks everyone for spending your time. We really appreciate you guys joining here. With that, David, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. I've posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel, and we'd like your feedback on today's session and hear what you'd like to see in future events. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within the coming weeks. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters and you, our audience, for joining us today.